Let's roll.
Okay, all right. Well, sorry about that, everybody. Again, hello, my name is Kelly Clement. I am your host for the webinar this evening. Our presenter will be Kevin Nelson, and we'll get into who Kevin Nelson is and what we're doing here in just a minute. But as always, we're going to start our exciting webinars with our exciting disclaimer. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. This demonstration is designed to instruct you on using MetaStock and accompanying software plugins and is not a recommendation to buy or sell, but rather guidelines to interpreting and using the specific indicators and features within the software. The information, software, and techniques presented today should only be used by investors who are aware of the risk inherent in trading. MetaStock shall have no liability for any investment decisions based on the use of their software, any trading strategies, or any information provided in connection with the company. Well, there you go. There's our fun, exciting disclaimer. As always, it's just, we're not here to tell you what to buy or sell. You all have your own risk tolerances and what you want to trade. So don't take any trade recommendations based off of what we say here. You need to make your own decisions in trading. So let's go ahead and introduce Kevin Nelson. This handsome gentleman here on your screen is Kevin Nelson. Kevin has a long storied history with MetaStock. He actually used to be the sales manager here at MetaStock 20 years ago plus. He was actually my boss when I first started here at MetaStock. I was lucky enough to have him give me a job and bring me on as part of the company. So thank you, Kevin, for that. But Kevin is someone who knows MetaStock inside and out. Having that history of being here and working with MetaStock for 25 plus years, you'd imagine somebody knows a lot about MetaStock. Well, he actually spends his time researching different ways of doing things, helping people identify the best ways to use the software, and really get in and help them learn the software. So when he left MetaStock, he actually left to start a training company specifically around MetaStock because people started talking to him about, hey, how can I do this in MetaStock? And how can I do this in MetaStock? And he put together these amazing training sessions to help people learn more about MetaStock and how to do things in MetaStock. And he'll actually show you some things that you never knew you could do in MetaStock. It's actually pretty incredible. So let's go ahead and bring Kevin on. He's going to be talking to us about identifying trendline breakouts inside MetaStock and good ways to do that. So Kevin, come on.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you very much. Kelly, that was probably the best introduction I think I've ever had. So,
oh, look at that.
That was good. That was really good. So if you would, go ahead. Can I go ahead and share my screen now?
Yes, I am going to make you the presenter.
Okay.
And you should have the screen there about right now.
Perfect. Let me know when you can see it.
We got you.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to get out of your way, Kevin.
Thanks again. Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to tonight's webinar. Again, my name's Kevin Nelson, and like Kelly said, I started with MetaStock quite a while ago, and in 2008, I left the company to start a training company just because I've received so many different requests from people that were just looking for more help with the program, and that's where we started this particular website, which is called learnmetastock.com. And at learnmetastock.com, we can help you in a lot of different ways, but anywhere from live training to live classes, recordings, formulas, I mean, you name it. But I'll tell you a little bit more about our website and the different services that we offer at the end of today's presentation, because what I want to do right now is I just want to jump straight into our presentation tonight, and then we'll go from there. And if you have any types of questions, make sure and let me know. Send me a message in the chat window, and I'll be more than happy to try to help you out here. I'll probably save most of the questions for the very end, but if it's something in particular like what I'm doing at that point, make sure, again, like I say, and let us know. So what I'd like to do tonight is I would like to show you what I call scanning for breakouts using trend lines and how this whole thing kind of came about. And what our game plan is for tonight is what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the different types of trendline tools that you have available inside the program. And then, of course, how to work with them as well, and how to interpret the different types of indicators that you have available there. And in addition to that, I'm also going to show you how we can create an exploration that'll help you go out and search and look for different types of price breakouts in relation to the trend lines. And lastly, what I'll do is I'll show you also how you can test these different trading strategies as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. And this particular chart that we're looking at here is a chart of the SPY, which is an ETF for the S&P 500. The symbol is just SPY. And what you've got here is that when you first open up a chart, probably most people know this about working with MetaStock, is you've got a trend line tool over here on the left-hand side, which is this diagonal tool. And if you click on it, how you work with it is that if you hold down your left mouse button and you drag it from one part of your chart to the next, you can draw these different areas here on your chart, and you can identify, different support, resistance levels, and so forth. But a really commonly asked question that I get is, okay, I can see that I can draw these trend lines on my chart, but is there something else that I can do with it? Can I tell MetaStock or ask MetaStock to tell me what securities are breaking through the trend line, for example, or whether the trend line is up or down and so forth? And the answer is that with this particular trend line, when you draw it here on your chart using this tool over here, this is pretty much just a static line that unfortunately there's just not a lot you can do with it other than using it for your own notations to help identify the different support and resistance areas and so forth. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on each one of these and I'm going to remove them here for a minute here. And then I'm going to show you another tool that you have available inside your program, which is called the linear regression trend line. Now, the linear regression trend line is a tool that you have available inside your program, and you can get it from a couple different ways. First of all, over here on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a little left and right arrow button. And if you click on this arrow button, you can cycle through a lot of the different tools here. And if you cycle through and find this particular one right here, you'll see it says linear regression when you hover your mouse over it. So that's one way to load this particular regression trendline tool. Another way to do it is if you go up here to the very top and click on the insert button. And then from here, you can then choose the linear regression tool from here as well. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on it. And then what happens is that now you'll see that nothing's really happened here on our chart. But if I hold down my left mouse button and I drag my mouse from one part of my chart to the next, you'll see that it will draw the trend line for me. And what's nice about that is that then if I grab this trend line by clicking on it, then if I drag it around my chart, you'll see that it'll actually automatically fit the data or draw the trend line over that particular period of time. So to kind of figure out how to work with this, one thing you can do is that if you hover directly over the trend line, it'll give you some more information. First of all, it's telling me that I'm working with a linear regression trend line, the date that I currently have my pointer at, the value where my pointer is, and the number of periods or the length of the trend line, in this case is 29. And then, of course, then the slope down here at the bottom. Now, the way that you interpret the slope is that if it's a positive number above 0, it's basically generally trending or basically moving upward. If the number is less than 0 or a negative number, let's drag it back here, for example, and then I hover directly over it, you'll see I've got a negative 0.69. That's indicating that I've got a negative slope, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it over here on my chart. And what I want to do is you'll also notice that on this trend line tool, I have these little boxes at the very end. These are called edit boxes. And if you hover over it, you'll see you'll have a little hand there that if you hold down your left mouse button, you can drag that and make that trend line as long as you want or as short as you want. And if the shorter that you make that trend line, as you drag it around your chart, you'll see it'll be more and more responsive there for you as well. So if I hover over that line here again, you'll see that this particular trend line now is 19 periods long. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm actually going to shorten that just a little bit here. And what my goal is here is I want to get down to 14 periods. So I'm going to make it just a little bit longer. There we go. And that should probably do it right. Oh, that's 15. I'm going to go down one more bar if I can. And there we go. Now we're at 14. Now, the reason why I set this to 14 periods is because I'm going to show you some other indicators here in just a minute. And what happens is that these indicators are all using 14 as the default setting. So I want to try to keep this as simple and straightforward as possible and just use the default settings here. So again, my trend line tool is set for 14 periods, and you'll see I just have it drawn over this part of my chart. Now, one quick thing I just want to show you just real quick when working with these trendline tools like this, you'll see that I can drag this around. If I zoom way in here on my chart, for example, and then I try to grab this trend line, you'll notice that if I'm actually clicking on the line, and you'll also see I'm not seeing any type of pop-up when I hover over that line. What happens is that unfortunately, we're zoomed in a little bit too far on the trend line tool, and I can't move it around. If that happens to you, the way that you get around that is you just zoom out just a little bit here and then just hover over it. And then when you hover over it, you should be able to move it from there. So again, if you draw a trend line like that on your chart and you can't select it, try zooming out a little bit, and then you should be able to grab that trend line at that point. All right. Now, the other thing I want to point out here too is that this trend line here, you'll see that maybe, some people would say, well, that isn't exactly how I would draw my trend line, for example. I probably draw my trend line across the bottom of these bars or something like that. Well, this particular tool here is that if you double click directly on it, that'll open up what's called a properties dialog here. And inside this properties dialog, underneath this price field, you can then choose what you want to have that based off of. So for example, like if I'd rather have it based off the low of the price bar, what I could do is I could select low, click on apply, and you'll see how that jumps down now to the bottom of the price bars. It's using the bottom of the price bars to identify that trend over that period of time. And again, same thing, for example, like if I choose the high, and then click on apply, you'll see that now it kind of jumps up. So what I'm going to do again to try to keep things straightforward is I'm going to base it off the closing price, click on close. And the reason why I'm doing that again is because that's just the default settings whenever you go to apply this. All right, so again, I've got this linear regression trend line here plotted on my chart. It's based off the closing price and it's using 14 periods right now. Now, the next thing I want to do is up here in our indicator quick list here, is that if you scroll down here in these top formulas right here, look for a particular indicator here, which is called the linear regression indicator. And what I want you to do with this one is just hold down your left mouse button and drag it directly on top of your price bars like that. Make sure they change colors. Let go of your mouse button, and that'll plot the indicator directly on there. And here you'll notice that the default is 14 periods, and also it's based off the closing price. So again, those are the default settings, and that's why I wanted to leave this as the default. I'll click on OK, and that'll plot this red line here on our chart. Now this red line, it kind of looks like a moving average, for example, but it actually operates a little bit differently. And what this is representing, it's representing the last period of that particular trend line. So again, it's using 14 periods. It's based off the closing price. And watch how this works now. This is a 14 period trend line. And if I drag this trend line around, what I want you to pay attention to is the very end of the trend line, how it intersects with that red line. Everywhere that I drag this trend line, you'll notice that the endpoint rides on that red line. So, excuse me. That's a really important point, because what this is telling you is that by looking at any point here on my chart very quickly, I can tell exactly that these price bars, for example, will definitely be the over the top of the trend line at that point in time. And then vice versa, for example, like if I drag to end right here on this price bar, I know that this is going to be below the trend line at that point in time. So I'll drag it back there a little bit, and you can see that that's clearly below the trend line. So again, what's nice about this is once you start to understand how this indicator works, then what we can do is then we can use this indicator in a lot of different ways. And I'll give you some different ideas here in just a minute. But pay attention how this end of the trend line rides along that particular line. Now, the next indicator I want you to take a look at here inside of our list here. Again, I'll scroll down here in this top list. And this indicator that I'm looking for is called the linear regression slope. Now, this particular one, I'm going to drag it up here to the very top, and I'm going to plot it in a new inner window here of our chart. And again, you'll see the default is 14 periods based off the closing price. We'll click on OK, and that'll plot our indicator. Now, what this thing is telling us, this is telling us what the slope is at any point on our chart. And the idea is that if this line is moving up, I know that my trend line is becoming more and more positive. And if this line moves down, I know my trend line is becoming more and more negative. Okay. So for example, like right here, let's look at this point right here. I'll kind of back up here just a little bit, but this is a relatively high point here on our chart. This looks like it's April 12th. So I'll drag this back here. So this coincides with April 12th. And what this is telling me is that this is pretty much the steepest or the most positive the trend line has been up until that point. And then shortly after that point, it becomes more and more negative. So as you can see here, if I drag this trend line just a little bit forward, you'll see it becomes more and more flat, or basically kind of flattens out after that point. So that's what this indicator is telling us. This is telling us it's becoming more positive. This is telling us it's becoming more negative. Now, the other thing that's actually really good to know about this particular indicator here is when it's crossing the value, or basically the value of 0, meaning it's either becoming positive or becoming negative, for example. So to display that or give you a better idea what that might look like, I'm going to double click directly on the indicator itself. This again will open up the properties dialog. And in this case, I'm going to jump over to the horizontal line here, and I'm going to put in a value of 0. I'll click on the add button and click on OK, and that'll give us a 0 line right through the middle of this indicator here. Now, why this is important is that every time that this red line, or everywhere that this red line is above the value of 0, I know that I have a positive trend. Everywhere that this indicator is below the value of 0, I know I have a negative trend. So for example, again, like I say, this indicator right here is all positive during this point. Oops, let me go ahead and grab it, and I'll drag it back. And there, right there, for example, you'll see that at this point here, this is actually negative at this point here. So this date right here was the bottom of that move on March 30th. Is showing a value of a negative 0.14, for example. So let me go ahead and move this over just one tick right there. And if I hover over that line, you'll see the slope is a negative 0.14 on March 19th. So this is, again, is telling us what this trend line tool is doing at any point on our chart. Now, why this is so important for you is because once you understand what this thing does, then you can use it however you want. If you want to go and create an exploration, you want to create a system test, an expert advisor, whatever the case may be, all you need to do is learn how to reference this. So the next thing I want to show you what to do here is I'm going to go ahead and drag this indicator here, and I'm going to drag it all the way over here to the very end of our chart here. So I'll drag it all the way over here to the very end, and I'll resize this window here just a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do at this point here is I just want to make sure that excuse me, I want to make sure that this is set up the way that I want it to look. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a bunch of different charts here from this point forward, and I want them all to look exactly the same way. So the way that you do that in MetaStock is you set up what's called a default template. And the way that you do that is once you have your chart set up the way that you want it, you right-click anywhere inside your chart, choose Save as Default Template, and it'll ask if you want to replace your existing one. You say yes, and then go ahead and close down the chart. And then the next step is you go to File and then choose Delete Smart Charts. And by doing that, what that'll do is that'll basically reset MetaStock short-term memory and kind of wipe everything out. So from that point forward, you'll be, every time you open up a chart or a security, they'll all look exactly the same way. So I'll go ahead and click on yes and click on OK. And now everything's kind of been reset for me. So the next thing I want to do is I want to show you an exploration that I have available up on the Learn MetaStock website, that if you go up and click on the Explorer, for example, to open up the different scans that you have available, once you install this from the Learn MetaStock website here, you'll find an exploration available here for you, which is called the Linear Regression Exploration. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And you'll find inside of here, this is going to then show you what's involved with this particular exploration. And what I've done is I've notated what all the different columns represent here, from column A through column J. So column A, for example, is just going to give us the day of the month. Now, why do I want to have the day of the month? And the answer is I want to make sure that my data is current and I'm scanning through the data that I'm interested in. Well, next, you'll see underneath column B and column C, this is going to identify if the slope is either positive or the slope is negative. Column D and E will identify if the slope just became positive or just became negative. And one thing I do want to point out here that, I'm sorry, in these tab headings, you'll see, for example, like it says like column D and E, it identifies it as slope positive X, for example. What happens is that whenever you're naming a column, for example, in the Explorer, you have 8 spaces in order to work with. So you have to be kind of creative sometimes with the names of the columns. So for example, when I'm trying to identify when something is crossing something, I use the letter X. So in this case, for example, it says slope positive X. So that tells me that it's a positive cross, for example. And then E would be a negative cross. So anyway. But column F and G will identify if the closing price is either above or below the trend line. Column H and I will identify if the closing price just crossed above or crossed down below the trend line. And then the last one, column J, will identify the actual degree of the slope. So let's go ahead and run this scan. I'll click on OK. And to run it, just go ahead and select it. And then I'll choose a database for it to run on. So for example, on this one, I'm going to go to my public online data list, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to open up this directory here, which I've got set up as my index constituents. And I'll select the Dow Jones Industrials, which has the 30 stocks in it. Now, to run the scan, over here on the right-hand side, I've got it set to scan on the last 1,250 records, which is approximately about 5 years of historical data. I've got it set up to run on daily data. And then I'll tell it to use the current exchange date and time. And then we'll leave everything else the same. And I'll go ahead and click on my Start Exploration. And this will run out and basically find those different fields for me and tell us exactly what those results are. Now, the first time you typically run an exploration of the day, on your computer, it usually takes a little bit longer for it to get started. But once it goes through there, it usually runs through pretty quickly. All right, so for our first scan here, you'll see that all my securities here all have 11 in the day column. And this is what I'm looking for. This is the first formula that I want to return, which is the day of the month. I want to make sure that I'm scanning through the correct data. So it's just a real quick, easy way to make sure that we're looking at good data. The next 2 columns of data will identify either a positive slope or negative slope. The way that this is set up, if you ask the program a yes or no, true or false type of question, if the answer to your question is true, it'll come back with a value of 1. If the answer to your question is false, it comes back with a value of 0. So very quickly, I can identify which ones are true and which ones are false. So for example, I know that Boeing, for example, has a positive slope. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that chart. And then I'll click on my negative slope, and we'll see if we have any there. We have quite a few there. So there's 3M. So I'll go ahead and open up that one. And then let's go ahead and move this report out of the way, and we'll take a quick look. So our first one, 3M right here, you'll see is basically identifying the slope to be negative. So if I'm zoomed in a little bit too far, I can't pick it. But if I'll zoom out a little bit, you'll see the slope is a negative 0.08. So it's basically just kind of sloping down right now. And also what's interesting here is look at this last price bar, how it was sloping down, and now it's starting to break above that bar. Now, the other thing that I'd notice up here too is our slope indicator. I can also tell that this is going to be negative by the value of this indicator up here at the top. And you'll see also at the last data point, it has a value of a negative 0.089 again, which again is the value of this trend line. So that's 3M. And then on the opposite side is Boeing. And here you can see Boeing has a nice trend up. And then if I look at the value of the indicator up here at the top, you'll see the value has a 0.9. In fact, it's been positive now since around the 26th or said around the, well, about around the 1st of August, I guess we'll just say. All right. So that's a positive and negative slope in that report. And let me jump back over to that report. And so the next 2 columns, this will identify if it's just crossing, for example, you'll see the slope positive X means the slope or basically just crossed to the positive side. and then slope negative X just crossed down to the negative side. So let's take a look at a couple of those. So here's Caterpillar that just became positive. So we'll open up that security. And then for the slope that just crossed down, for example, is Microsoft. So we'll open that one up and again, move our report out of the way. So first of all, we have Microsoft here. And you can see that what's happening here is the trend line here on Microsoft has been really flat here for the last few weeks here. Really not a lot going on with Microsoft. And right at this point, it was actually positive up until it looks like today, where it just crossed down into the negative territory there. So again, that's Microsoft. And then on the other side of the coin is Caterpillar. And Caterpillar, as you can see, has been in quite a drop here for the last couple months here, 2-3 months. And now what's happening here is it's starting to trend up. And also what's interesting is we've got some price bars breaking above that trend line here on heavier volume. So something's happening here with Caterpillar. And again, I can see that with our indicator up here at the very top. The indicator was negative recently, and it just became positive here on this last price bar. Okay, so that's Caterpillar. Now let's jump back over to our report here again. So then the next two columns here is just the close is either above the trend line or the close is below the trend line. So let's go ahead and sort or find a couple of securities for that one. So there's 3M. We've already looked at that one. Let's look at American Express, and then we'll look at the close below the trend line. There's IBM. We'll go ahead and open up that one. Take a look at those two. So these two, this particular report is just identifying what the closing price is doing at the very end or the very last of the trend line there. So here IBM is below the trend line. And then on the other side of the coin is American Express. And American Express, the closing price is above the trend line. Okay, so that's what those two columns mean. We'll jump over, and then these two columns here is the trend positive X, trend negative X. And this is going to identify if the closing price is crossing above the trend line. And then on the other side, this will identify if the closing price is crossing down below the trend line. So for a security that's crossing up above the trend line is Amgen. So let's go ahead and open up that one. And then for the security crossing down below the trend line, we'll sort on that one. There's one security and there's Visa. So we'll go ahead and open up that one. And again, we'll move this out of the way. And so here we've got Visa. And what's going on with Visa here is Visa was actually above the trend line yesterday, but it closed just below the trend line here today. And then on the other side here, this is Amgen. And this is an interesting one. Amgen's been in a really slow or really steep decline, but the price closed above the trend line on this last bar. Okay. And then the last thing inside this report is just going to identify the degree of the slope. So for example, I'll go ahead and sort from the highest, and we'll find that the highest slope is Goldman Sachs. So we'll go ahead and open up that one. And then the slope with the biggest negative decrease is Amgen again. So we'll go ahead and open up that one just to take another quick look. So Amgen, out of the Dow 30 stocks, Amgen has the steepest decline of a 14-period trend line right now. So that's the one that's dropping the quickest right now. And then on the other side is Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs has the highest positive slope going upward over the last 14 periods. Okay. All right. So now the question is, well, what can we do with this information? Well, once you have or basically understand what this thing is trying to tell you, then we can have it do whatever we want to do. We can put it together in any type of combination that we want. So maybe what might be of interest to you is you might be interested in finding securities that have a negative slope, for example, but are just crossing up above that trend line right now. So to do that, let's say that we want to go out and we want to scan a database looking for just that particular criteria. Well, to do that, we want to incorporate the filter. And the filter is really the key to the Explorer. This is what allows you to find those securities that are of interest to you and weed out everything else that's not of interest to you. Now, there's two different ways to use a filter. You can either enter in the formula directly inside of this box here, or you can reference another formula inside of one of these tabs. And the key is is that in order to reference one of these formulas here, what you need to identify is that if it's coming back with a yes or true answer, all you need to do is identify it with the column and the column letter. So let's say, for example, that I'm looking for securities with a negative that are in a negative slope right now. Well, I know that that's going to be column C right here, and you'll see that it's again explained up here at the top. Column C is going to identify securities that have a negative slope. So underneath the filter, I want to go ahead and identify that. You abbreviate column with just COL, and then you put the letter of the column that you're interested in. So for example, like column C. So this will give me all securities that come back with a value of 1 inside of our report underneath this particular column. Okay, so that's going to give me all securities that have a negative slope. Second thing I want to do is I want to find securities that not only have a negative slope, but now are crossing up above that negative slope. So then what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the securities themselves to cross up above that negative slope. So in other words, then I'm looking, for example, like column H, and column H is telling me that the close crossed up above the trend line. So if you're looking for two different criteria, for example, the way that you do it in the filter is you say and then the second column that you're interested in. So in this case, it'd be column H. Okay, so this is going to give me back securities that meet the criteria for column C, and securities that give me the criteria that meet the securities that meet the criteria underneath column H. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. We'll click on OK, and again, one more time, we'll go ahead and run it. Now, here's something else that happens here, and this is something that maybe you've experienced before. Like I'm ready to run the scan right now, for example, but look, you'll see that I can't click on the Start Exploration. So if you can't click on the Start Exploration, that tells you something else is happening. And typically what the answer is that you have a report open. And if you have a report open, you first have to close the report before you can start another exploration. So in this case, I'll go ahead and close it down. And now you'll see I've got my Start Exploration that I can go ahead and click on, and I can start that next exploration. So I know that that's something that'll kind of get you sometimes. So somebody will be like, man, I just can't run this thing. And like I say, more often than not, you just have a report open that you just need to close down. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got 4 different securities here that have met the criteria. We've got Amgen, Apple, McDonald's, and Merck. So I'll go ahead and open up all these securities. We'll highlight them all and just click on our open chart, and we'll take a look at each one of these. So basically what these all should be showing us here is they should all be showing us securities that are in a negative trend here with the trend line over 14 periods, but the last bar closed above that trend line. So that's Merck and Company. Then we have McDonald's. Again, right here, we've got that drop down, and you'll see that price bouncing up. Excuse me. And we'll kind of zoom in again. Here's Apple. Apple's been pretty flat here, but the price is just barely closing above that trend line. And then our last security is Amgen, which is pretty interesting. This is one that's been in a big negative decrease here. And you'll see that last price bar is crossing up right there. Now, another thing I just want to do just real quick here for you too is you might be saying, well, what happened to Caterpillar? That was the one that we were looking at before that was kind of breaking out on higher volume. If you want to run a scan over a different period of time, what you can do is just unselect use the current exchange date and time, and then put in whatever date that you want. So in this case, I'll put in August 10th, and I'll rerun that same scan. We'll just see if that picks up Caterpillar now and finds that particular signal that I was looking at before. Oh, wasn't it Caterpillar? Let me go back here for 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and jump back here, and we'll open up Caterpillar. Oh, sorry. Caterpillar actually had a positive slope. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and drag. If I were to, and the reason why that didn't pop up is because I was looking for securities that had a negative slope, and then the last bar was trading above it. So in this particular one, in order to find this one, what I would have had to have done is, let's go back into that scan here, for example. And instead of looking for column C to have a negative slope, I'd be looking for column B to have a positive slope. So I change that C to a B, and then we'll go ahead and click on OK. And let's rerun that, and let's try that one more time and see what we come up with here. Okay, so this time it's looking for a positive slope and then the security crossing up. And one more time, I did not find it. What did I? Okay, bear with me here for just 1 second. Let's go back and I'll take one more look. I'm obviously doing this a little bit on the fly, but
Hey Kevin, you unchecked use current date time.
Oh, but I was looking at this one. This is August.
That's right. Sorry to jump in. Apologize.
So okay. All right. No. That's good. That's good. But basically what I was looking for in this case, like I say, was a positive slope here. And then that last bar crossing up. Oh, look at this. This is interesting. Okay. So what happened here on August 10th, look at our slope. Our slope is actually negative. And then this bar here on August 10th crossed up above it. So one more time, let me try that one more time here. That should be right there, August 10th, right? That has a negative slope and that bar is crossing up. And let me try that just one more time, just for the heck of it. So I've got August 10th selected, right? We'll open it back up. And if this doesn't work, I'll move on here. But again, we'll go back to our column C. We're running it on August 10th. We've got a negative slope. Column H is identifying that the closing price crossed up. We'll give it a shot. We'll try that one more time, and we'll see if that comes up. Okay. And if it doesn't come up, I'm missing something obvious, but I'll probably be here for a bit. Yeah, I'm missing something. So anyway, but that's kind of the idea. The idea is that you can set these things up to, again, like I say, go out and find the different types of setups that are of interest to you. I see the problem right here. August 9th, it crossed up on August 9th. So, okay, let me try this one more time. Sorry, my apologies, but I'm going to change this to August 9th. And we're going to do this just one more time. And if this doesn't work, then I will seriously move on. There. Oh, okay. I am going to move on. I don't know what the heck. All right. My apologies on that. All right. So anyway, so the point being, though, is that you can set up this scan basically to look for any type of criteria that you want in whatever type of combination that you want there as well. Now, once you've kind of have done that and you are able to find the securities that are of interest to you, then what you can also do is you can also test these strategies here as well. Okay. So to test them, the nice thing about this is, again, if you learn how to basically reference these different formulas and you're comfortable with formula writing and everything else, you can test pretty much any type of strategy that you want. But for this particular example, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a system test, but we're going to use the formulas that I created for you here in the Explorer. So I'm going to go back to my Explorer here. And what we're going to do for this example is I'll open it up and we're going to try to keep it really straightforward here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's say that I want to purchase a security if I have a positive slope over the last 14 bars, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy it if it's positive, and then I'm just going to get out of that trade if it turns negative, for example. So in this case, what I'll be looking for is this particular formula here, which I've got underneath column B. This is going to identify whether the 14-period slope is greater or above the value of 0. So what I'll do is I'll just make a copy of this formula. I'll cancel out of this dialog here, and I'm going to go to the system test, and we're going to create a new system test from scratch. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to right-click up here at the very top. I'm going to click on New System Test, and we're going to give it a name. And I'll go ahead and call this my linear regression class. And the buy order here, I'm going to click on the buy order. This is where you enter in your formula of what it is that you're interested in or why you would buy the security. And I'm just going to paste in that formula. And the formula is just going to identify that the slope is greater or above the value of 0. So that's what our criteria is to go long. And then just to go short or to exit the long position, I'll click on the sell order. I'll paste in that same formula. And then what I'll do is I'll say less than 0. So in other words, If I get long because the slope is above the value of 0, I'm going to get out of that long position if it drops down below the value of 0. Okay, click on OK. And then to run it, I'll go ahead and select it. And then what I also like to do is that when I'm developing different types of trading strategies and systems and indicators and so forth, I like to run it actually on a basket of securities. And the reason why I test it on a basket of securities is because I want to look at them overall, first of all, see how it basically did on that overall group, and make sure that I'm not really curve fitting this thing by accident. And if I make some changes, I want to see again how it performs on the overall group, and then I'll zero in on individual issues after that. So what I'm going to do for this example, again, I'm going to go ahead and test that again. We'll use the same database of the Dow Industrial, so those 30 securities. And over here on the right-hand side, I'll choose long positions. I'll tell it to go back over the last 5 years of data. We'll test it on daily data. And then underneath my trade options here, the way that I'm going to set this up or test this is I'm going to click on the account and I'm going to run what's called a points only test. And a points only test is just going to return back a raw number of points that were gained or lost in your system test. So if a security goes from say 50 to 55, for example, and that's the only trade you had, your system test result is just going to show you 5 points. Okay. Then underneath the broker, by choosing a points only test, that actually takes out of the equation any type of interest rates or margin requirements and so forth. So you'll see I've got all that kind of blanked out. And for my commissions, I've got set to 0. And then lastly, for my trade execution, you'll see I've got everything set to trade at the opening price with a 1-period delay. So once I've got that set up the way that I want it, I'll click on OK, and we'll go ahead and run this particular system test here. All right. And you'll see down here in the lower right-hand corner here that I've got 30 securities that it's running on. And this typically runs through pretty quickly here. And since it's not a real big basket here, so we'll take a look at the results here as soon as it's finished. All right. When it's finished, we'll click on View Results. And so here's the results for our Dow 30 stocks here. And what I'll do is I'll just sort on the net profit, for example. And you can see the vast majority of the securities tested profitably. And again, all it's really doing is identifying if the slope was positive or negative. So you'll see, for example, like Goldman Sachs generated, look, just go ahead and open one up, for example, generated 190 points versus a buy and hold at 243. Just real quick, what a buy and hold is just means that if I would have bought that security at the very first data point on our chart and held on to it, I'd be up 243 points. Well, if I traded this, I actually would have made 190 points. And the question is, well, why would you do that then if you're not even beating the buy and hold? Well, there's a number of reasons why you'd want to do that. But let me just show you a couple here just real quick. And that is by trading it, you're going to be in and out of that particular security numerous times. And one other thing that is really a point that I always like to look at is this number right down here at the bottom, this out of market timing. You'll see that the out of market timing, for example, is 553. What does that mean? That means that we tested 1,250 records, but we were out of the market 553 days or 553 bars. That means that we generated this number over, right, in quite a bit less time, 2 years less. So in other words, it took about 5 years to generate this number, and it took about 3 years to generate this particular number. So again, you're going to be in and out depending on how you want to trade, and also freeing up your money for other types of positions. So we'll go back here for just a second. So here's Home Depot, for example. We'll open that one up. And you'll see that this one generated 172 points versus a buy and hold. And again, we'll take a look at how much we were out of the market. We were out of the market over 2 years of time here. And again, to generate this number, we had to be in the market with our money fully locked up for that full 5 years. So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can take a look at this information. And the other thing we could take a look at is these numbers over here on the far right-hand side. This is our average profit to average loss. And very quickly, what this tells you is that for every point that you lost on a losing trade, this is how much you made on a winning trade. So typically what I like to look for is I like to look for as high of a number as possible, and generally around 3 to 1. So in other words, if my system tests are, 3 or higher to 1, that tells me that I can be wrong a lot more often than I'm right and still make pretty good money with that particular trading strategy. So for example, like here's Apple. You'll see that came in almost 5 to 1 here. It had 21 winning trades, 16 losing trades. We'll go ahead and open that up. It generated 110 points versus a buy and hold of 118. So it almost made the buy and hold. And again, scroll down here a little bit. You can see that we're out of the market, 400 bars. And lastly, up here at the top, you can click on the equity and you can see what the equity curve looks like and so forth. But again, I'm kind of getting off the path here, but this is the kind of stuff that we do a lot inside the Learn MetaStock classroom here. We can help you in a lot of different ways. So that's probably a pretty good segue here for me to go ahead and tell you a little bit about our services there at Learn MetaStock. So to check out our services, our website again is just called learnmetastock.com. And what we do is we can help you in a lot of different ways. We can help you either through live classes. We do up to 3 live classes per week. But where most of the people spend their time is inside this video library. And inside of here, you'll find we've got over 100 different training videos in here, anywhere from literally just getting started with the program to advanced formula writing and just about everything in between. But the nice thing about this is, again, it can be just a really good learning tool here for you. So what happens is to watch one, you sign into your account, you click on the Watch Now button. And what you'll notice is that you'll have access to all the videos. And then in addition to that, if we create anything for you, like any formulas for you to download, into your MetaStock program and so forth, they'll be located over here on the right-hand side where you can click on that. And these will install directly into your MetaStock program. So what we can do here at Learn MetaStock is we can save you a massive amount of time and effort, with your program here, to say the least. But for example, I'll scroll down. I'll just show you a few sections here. But this is a section just kind of getting started with the program itself. We'll scroll down here a little bit. We've got a video on Forecaster, a number of videos on the Expert Advisor, Option Scope, and we have quite a few videos here just on system testing, because this is an area, again, that's really important for a lot of people. And it's a good thing to have a good understanding of how your systems basically work over historical data sets. And I'll walk you through all the ins and outs and really kind of what to zero in on and what could be important for you and so forth. We'll scroll down here a little bit. Got a number of videos just on the Explorer, formula writing. And again, if you really do want to take this to the next level, it is really important that you do understand a little bit about the formula language there, to say the least. And even if you're not interested in creating your own strategies and so forth, it would definitely be to your advantage to at least understand why this thing is telling you to buy or sell at different points. And again, we can walk you through all the ins and outs there. We've got a number of videos just on the RMO. In fact, the new one that we just created was testing the RMO, which is a pretty interesting one. But just to give you a quick one on this, we actually found we tested the RMO in a lot of different ways. The RMO actually tests out pretty well. I think you'd be pretty impressed with that one. We have a number of videos just on stops, indicators, and probably the most popular area that we have is our trading strategy section. And what we do here is we'll take a trading strategy out of a publication like a magazine or a book, and we'll show you specifically how to actually duplicate that particular trading strategy. And again, what we'll do is that whenever we do this and we create formulas, you'll be able to download them directly into your program by just clicking on the file associated with that particular video. So again, we can save you a massive amount of time with your MetaStock program and really cut your learning curve, drastically here, to say the least. So anyway, so that's what I've got here for you tonight. I hope that was helpful. I'll go ahead and hand it back over to you, Kelly. Are there any questions or anything that I can help anybody with, by the way?
Yeah, we actually did have a question come in. One of the things that you were talking about during your presentation was about the Explorer result window getting lost.
Yeah.
And Hans had a question on if you could repeat how to find it when it's lost.
Oh, okay. So basically what might happen for you is that let's say, for example, that you're looking at a report. Let me just point out just real quick, when you're running an or have run an exploration, if there's a report available for it, there'll be an R inside of a set of brackets to the right-hand side. So let me go ahead and right click on it, and I'll click on report. And this will bring us right back to this particular report. So let's say that I just minimize this window, or go somewhere else inside the MetaStock program, for example. So let me go ahead and just jump over to there, and we'll go ahead and kind of minimize this. And let's say that I kind of forget that I have that window open, for example. And hang on for just one second. Oops. I'll tell you what, let's just run one here just real quick. I'll just run one again here on the Dow Jones here. And we'll just open that back up here just for a second here. Probably just a little bit easier way to explain it, because typically what I'll do is that when I see a lot of securities that come up in a report like this, well, this one only came up with one, but if I jump over to the MetaStock program, for example, I'll go ahead and minimize this. And then, for example, like I go to run another exploration, and my start exploration button is grayed out like that, that is a hint that I've got something open in the background. So what I typically do is I just hold down the Alt key and the tab, and that'll allow me to tab between the open applications, and that'll allow me to come back to that particular report. And then if I close down the report, then you'll see that then I will be able to run another exploration. So anyway, hope that helps.
Yeah, so he actually said, thanks. In my example, I use several screens. I know the report is open, but I can't find it even if I scroll through the screen using the Alt tab. Am I doing something wrong? Are there shortcut screens to get to it?
Oh, that's a good question. Kelly, can you help me with that one? If he can't find it even by Alt tab?
I think if you're using Alt tab, sometimes what happens is it gets it'll disappear behind MetaStock, and sometimes it's kind of part of that process. So what you might have to do in that case is actually go back and actually do what Kevin was saying. If you can't find it in the Alt tab, close the Power Console, reopen the Power Console, and then right-click on the report and open it there. That would be the way to do it.
Gotcha. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, you bet. But yeah, there's a couple different times it might get lost. So I get what happens there. So, but that's usually what Kevin showed you is the main way to get back to it. That's usually what happens. But if you can't find it with the Alt tab, just close the Power Console. So we've got a question over on YouTube, Kevin. It says, can you identify institutional trading Witherspoon sum? So I guess he's trying to ask if you can, with some programming. Okay, can you identify institutional trading with some programming?
Can I
Sorry,
identify?
I missed the next one.
Yeah, I'm not really 100% sure where to go with that one. I mean, typically, as far as like identifying institutional trading, if we're talking about, like, for example, like looking for volume, well, like, large block volume and so forth, we can do a lot of different types of scans on that. But typically what happens is in MetaStock, what you get in the MetaStock program is you get the open, high, low, and close in the volume. So generally speaking, I do know that when I get huge spikes in the volume, on increasing prices, I know that I can pretty much come to the conclusion that the institutions are jumping into positions or out of positions and so forth based on what the volume is doing. But that's about as close as I could get, for example, using the MetaStock program. Maybe Kelly, maybe you might want to add something to that as well.
No, I actually agree with you, Kevin. That's kind of usually the best way to identify it is in those volume spikes. So I'm with you on that one. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions here, Kev. Let's see. No. And from the other side on the disappearing thing, they said that sounds like that will work. So Great answer there.
Good.
Mind if I take the screen back for a second, Kevin?
Please do.
All right. All right. One of the things from my side, one of the things I really like about Kevin's training courses is if you sit down and you go through them, they're very well laid out. They're very concise. In fact, when we have new employees start here at MetaStock, we actually sit them down and have them go through Kevin's training because it takes them from point A to point B to point C and methodically lays out how you should be using MetaStock in different ways that you can be using MetaStock. So if you haven't used the Learn MetaStock courses before, there's absolute value to them in helping you learn more about MetaStock and getting the most out of MetaStock. Because if you're a MetaStock user, you know there's a lot to MetaStock. There's a lot you can do with MetaStock. And most of us probably use about 15% of what MetaStock can do. There's 85% more out there that can get you a lot of value. And by using learnmetastock.com, you can actually get that other 85% of value out of MetaStock. So let me just kind of talk a little bit more about what Learn MetaStock is. Kevin's kind of taking you through some of the high-level overview on his website, showing you some of the recorded videos. So there's videos on everything as he showed you. You can go through basic materials. You can go through different videos on specific things that you want to learn about. And I love how he gives you the downloads when he shows you something specific. So if you're looking at like today's class, the Trendline Breakouts, you can just go download that scan. You don't have to spend time putting it all into MetaStock. It's just available to you as part of your subscription. So his classes are absolute value, as I've mentioned. What we do for Learn MetaStock, we've partnered with Kevin for years on this Learn MetaStock, and we really find great customer feedback on what comes from the Learn MetaStock people who take his courses. So for Learn MetaStock, it's just $99 per month. It's a month-to-month subscription. There's no contracts with it. You can use it for as long as you want. We do here offer, as part of the webinar, $99 per month. And if you're a first-time user, you can actually get $99 for the first 3 months. So you pay for the first month, get the second and third month for free, and that gives you 3 months for $99. Imagine all you could learn about MetaStock for $33 a month. It's absolutely fantastic. So to take advantage of that, you just go to metastock.com/learnmetastock3for1, or you can give us a call as always, 800-882-3040, or go to metastock.com/sales chat. Just tell them you're here in the webinar. You want to take advantage of the Learn MetaStock offer to get started on that, get up and running, and learn the most you can about MetaStock. Because MetaStock's out there to help you make money. Learn MetaStock is there to help you learn how to use the tools to help you do that. So, Kevin, anything you'd add to that?
No, that was perfect. Thanks, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, as always, for coming to our webinars. I always love Kevin's stuff. It's one of those webinars where every time I attend, I learn something new myself. So it's always great to have you here, Kevin. We appreciate you coming in and talking to us about some of your stuff and what you do. So much appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Just go again to metastock.com/learnmetastock3for1, 800-882-3040, or metastock.com/sales chat. Thanks, Kevin. Have a great night.